everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're looking at something truly fascinating. We're going to break down the work of German trauma specialist Gopal Norbert Klein and a really unique method he developed called floating. If you've ever found yourself totally baffled by repeating conflicts in your own life or your relationships, you are in the exact right place. We're going to look at the absolute basics of how we connect. We'll keep it incredibly simple to understand, and yet we're going to provide you with a highly detailed map of what's really happening just beneath the surface of human interaction. Okay, let's dive right into this. Why is it that despite our absolute best intentions, our relationships can sometimes feel like literal battlegrounds? Why do we find ourselves repeating the exact same painful patterns, having the exact same arguments, and feeling the exact same distress, even when we change partners or friends? It's a deeply, deeply relatable human experience, right? And to really understand it, we have to look closely at the underlying mechanics of our minds. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. What is developmental trauma? 2. The mind body connection. 3. How floating works. And 4. The magic of connection. Okay, starting with section 1. What is developmental trauma? The hidden roots. First things first, we need to define the absolute basics of developmental and attachment trauma. You see, when we hear the word trauma, we usually think of a massive, dramatic, isolated event. But developmental trauma, it's totally different. It's about constant relational patterns from childhood. Imagine a child interacting with their parents, but they quickly learn that certain parts of themselves, their sadness, maybe their anger, or sometimes even just their wild joy and aliveness, have absolutely no place in that dynamic. So, to survive and to keep that crucial bond with their caregivers, the child is essentially forced to suppress those vital emotions. And over time, this constant suppression creates a massive ongoing stress in the child's body. And this brings us to a really crucial distinction. Shock trauma, like we just touched on, usually involves isolated, intense events. If someone has a shock trauma without underlying attachment issues, well, it can often be treated pretty effectively by working purely with the physical body to release that trapped stress. But developmental trauma is a whole different ballgame. Because it's based on constant childhood relational patterns and emotional suppression, you can't just treat the body. It actually requires a completely different mind first approach to really heal those relational distortions. Moving right along to section 2, the mind body connection, or where does trauma live? Let's move to how this builds over a person's lifespan. Follow this timeline with me. In childhood, you are completely dependent on your parents, right? So you suppress your emotions just to stay safe. You literally can't solve the problem then. As you're growing up, you carry all that built up physical stress, but crucially, you also carry distorted ideas about what relationships actually are. You essentially learn that contact means hiding parts of myself. Finally, we hit adulthood. Your environment is no longer destructive. You can actually choose who you spend time with. But because of that old programming, you end up recreating your own relational suffering in the here and now, projecting those old childhood dynamics onto totally safe people today. And here is a major, major paradigm shift from Gopal Norbert Klein's work. Trauma manifests first in the mind, not the body. This is huge because it challenges a lot of current thinking. The distress, the tension, and the dysregulation you might feel in your physical body right now aren't just random external issues. They are actually immediate reactions to thoughts and distorted relational concepts that are originating in your mind. Essentially, the mind is actively signaling the body that it's in a dangerous childhood dynamic, even when it isn't. Which perfectly explains why traditional physical trauma therapies can often fall short for developmental trauma. If a therapy just tries to regulate the nervous system with physical exercises, breathing, shaking, body work, it's essentially treating the body's stress as an external issue. It completely ignores the mind's distorted relational concepts. So you might feel super relaxed after a great yoga session, but the absolute second you interact with your partner, your mind projects an old threat, and boom, the mind eventually just brings the body right back into stress. You have to address the root cause, which is the mind's projections. Which brings us to section 3, how floating works. The cure in the present. So, what is floating? It's a group trauma process, usually with up to about 20 people. But what makes it so revolutionary is its absolute simplicity. It focuses entirely on honest sharing in the present moment. In fact, in floating, the past is completely irrelevant. It literally doesn't matter what specific abuse or neglect happened 30 years ago. Why? Because the trauma is manifesting right now in how you are avoiding connection in the here and now. So, the crucial point is how this incredibly complex psychology gets distilled down into three simple, basic actions. First, the client looks around the group and selects a member that their unconscious mind naturally wants to project onto, someone who maybe triggers them or just seems relevant to their suffering. Second, with the therapist's help, they identify the specific mental concept or dream world they're projecting onto that person. And third, they honestly communicate exactly that thought to the person and simply ask, is it true? Let's look at a really concrete example straight from Klein's work. A client might look at a totally safe stranger in the group and say something like, you want to attack me because you cannot deal with my sadness. Now, to anyone on the outside, this sounds completely irrational, right? But we really have to understand that for the person saying it, this isn't just a fleeting thought. They are heavily identified with this programming. To their nervous system, this projection feels like absolute, terrifying reality. And yet, despite how deeply ingrained these fears are, deep suffering can sometimes be transformed in just 20 minutes. Yes, literally 20 minutes. Klein notes that healing isn't necessarily about logging years and years and years of talk therapy. It's actually about the precise moment those rigid mental structures dissolve in the face of actual present day reality. And finally, section 4, the magic of connection and overwriting the dream world. Klein summarizes this so brilliantly. He states, the real deep connection and relationship is the transformation. And this brilliantly illustrates a core truth. The clinical technique itself is entirely secondary. The therapist isn't the center of attention here. The magic is simply bringing two human beings into honest, undistorted contact. Ultimately, the healing we are all desperately seeking is just the contact we never got to experience in childhood. Now, of course, doing this requires immense skill because communicating a suppressed emotion, like simply looking at someone and saying, I feel anger, that can trigger massive panic in someone with developmental trauma. So the therapist is absolutely essential. They aren't the focus, but they guide that healthy interaction. They skillfully bypass those intense survival and defense mechanisms. And most importantly, they anchor the client, reminding their nervous system that there is no real danger today. Because the process is so neurologically delicate, it actually requires 2 to 2.5 years of highly specialized training for a therapist to facilitate it safely. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the mechanism of the cure actually works. When the client voices their terrifying projection, you want to attack me, and the other person responds honestly from a place of real connection, something incredible happens. The mind's old structure literally dissolves. It gets overwritten by real, present moment information. The client's nervous system realizes, oh, wait, I am safe. My thought about this person was just a dream from my childhood. And instantly, without ever directly touching the body, the physical body relaxes and the dysregulation just ends. It's a beautifully simple yet deeply, deeply profound approach to human suffering. So I want to leave you with this final thought to reflect on in your own life. What dream world projections are you currently projecting onto your own safe relationships today? Where might you be defending against a ghost from your past? According to Klein, there are three specific aspects to these projections, and we're going to dive into the detailed mechanics of those three aspects in part 2 of this explainer. You absolutely will not want to miss it. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.